And welcome to Point Blank. This is KTN News. Before I tell you about my guest today, let's see what he's done in the past.
Mutahi Kagwe is a seasoned Kenyan politician who served as the first senator of Nyeri County. Kagwe is a former cabinet minister for information and communications. In the 11th Parliament, he chaired the Senate Committee on Information and Technology and also sat in the Senate Committee of Finance and Budget and the Liaison Committee. He is the immediate past chairman of the Senate Education Committee. From 2002 to 2007, Kagwe served as the 5th Member of Parliament for Mukurweini constituency. He was the chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Finance, Trade, Tourism and Planning before his appointment as a cabinet minister. As cabinet minister, he spearheaded the construction of the transformational East African Marine System, the first fiber optic project for East Africa. It was during his time as cabinet minister that Kenya launched M-Pesa, the world's first ever money transfer system. As senator, his credits include the championing of the Best Classroom, an early childhood education program that aspires to promote the quality provision of early childhood development education nationwide. He recently sponsored the Cybersecurity and Protection Bill currently in the Senate of Kenya. He has many professional memberships, including the Marketing Society of Kenya, the Kenya Institute of Management, the Parliamentary Network of the World Bank, and the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. Outside of politics, he has held and continues to hold many positions, including chairman of several corporate boards. He is also the former Multimedia University Council chairman. Senator Kagwe holds both a bachelor and a master's degree. He was commended with the Elder of the Golden Heart by the President of the Republic of Kenya in recognition of his distinguished service to the nation.
Most people know my guest as the former Minister for Communication under Mwai Kibaki. But to me, Honorable Mutahi Kagwe is a brother and a friend. Karibu sana, Mheshimiwa. Thank you for coming to Point Blank.
Thank you very much and congratulations for the show.
I don't know if you and I can today discuss informative issues. Because Mutahi, my worry is the ethnicity that is destroying our country. Politics of tribe, not politics of ideology. What's your bird's eye view?
I think that, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to the show. And I want to, from the outset, agree with you that we have a problem, and it's the problem of ethnicity, separate from the issue of ideology. Tony, if you remember, during independence, or just post-independence, Kenya was one nation, believing in itself with one destiny. Somewhere along the line, we lost that, and Kenyans became first their tribes, and secondly, Kenyans. I think we need to have a shift in that. We need to have a paradigm shift to bring Kenyans back. And this issue is an issue that is not just a question of legislation, because we have legislated these things. It is not just a question of politics. It is a question of social change, complete political, cultural, and social change.
Mutahi, I wanted to ask you, and I'm not interrupting you. Looking back at the Lancaster Constitution, the attempts to change the constitution that flopped at Bomas of Kenya, and the 2010 Constitution, whether there is something wrong with the law as written, that tribe is more superior than the mind.
There is something wrong with the Constitution as it is. However, this is not just an issue of Constitution, Tony. This is an issue, it is an overwhelming issue. It is an issue of education. It's an issue of a Constitution that is responsive to that sort of situation that we are in. So it is an overriding aspect. And I think, Tony, what we have to be very careful about is that we started off with a country, at least when I was a kid, we started off with a country that was largely not ethnic. We have lived through to see a country that has been turned into an ethnic enclave. Now we need, in going forward, we need to be responsible individuals, responsible persons who must leave the nation where our children and their children are going to live back to where we found it.
Very
and
specifically,
an ethnic Kenya.
Very specifically, SDP and that journey. Because I don't know, I remember you fondly then. It's almost, I've lost your voice, Mutahi.
Yes, in 1997, Tony, if you remember, you and I were members, active, passionate members of the Social Democratic Party. And I believe it is a party, it was the first party that put ideology first. If you looked at the ethnic makeup of the Social Democratic Party, including the members of parliament who were there at the time, then you could see the embryonic stages of an ideological position in the country. And essentially, in the Social Democratic Party, we believed in a philosophy of supporting the poor. In other words, starting with social justice before we move into other aspects of life. You start with social justice. A very good example that we used to give, if you remember, being that if you are going to have construction of a highway, as in Thika Highway or these other big highways, you will start by asking yourself, where will the bicycles ride, where will the people walk, and then where will the cars drive? Not the other way around. That is essentially an ideological position.
And then I think you were brave because we had a lady presidential candidate.
Charity Ngili, yes.
And in Central Province, I think you had 6 MPs. Honorable Jehoga
I think you are 7 of them. We are almost 7. The whole of Thika, Kiambu was essentially members of the Social Democratic Party in Ukambani. So we had a cross-section of members of parliament.
In fact, Moses Mohi beat Uhuru Kenyatta.
Absolutely. We took the Gatundu seat. In fact, Gatundu, if you remember, both Gatundu North and Gatundu South went to the Social Democratic Party, including Dagoretti, which was Beth Mogo's seat. So I think there was a resonance. There was a resonance in the populace about an ideological party that can belong to Kenyans, that does not necessarily belong to an ethnic group or a tribe, and then asking others to join. We started off from, we are an ideology, we are pro-poor, we believe in social justice, and therefore, these are the things we are going to do when a social democratic party is in power.
So Mutahi, the social justice is described internationally sometimes as the third way.
It is.
Particularly in Germany and so on. And I'm actually intrigued about what you think about the Berlin Wall and why you think at that time in Europe it came down as it did. Was that defining for Europe?
I think it was, but I think that we must also remember that the departure point for the different stakeholders in the collapse of the Berlin Wall was essentially, there were essentially different interests that converged into one, eventually bringing down the wall. Let me explain. On the East German side, there was a lot of suffering that was going on. Don't forget that was communist Germany. And the suffering got to the point where a revolution was an inevitability. On the West German side, there was interest in terms of the possibilities of expansion of Germany and also the post-war promise by West Germany that eventually Germany will be reunited. And if you remember, there was an attempt by Margaret Thatcher and other Europeans to try and slow down the process of uniting Germany. Helmut Kohl is the one who said it is going to be done, and it's going to be done now and immediately. Because anything postponed like that was going to be a revolution. So yes, there was the third way, there was a convergence of the ideology, but at that time it had already shifted. It was not necessarily a social-democratic position in Germany.
So coming to the continent, apartheid fell as well. And people who are critics of Mandela say that yes, he was one of the greatest people for his suffering, but after him, he didn't prepare South Africa. Would you agree that Mandela didn't leave South Africa ready as a democracy?
I would completely disagree. I would completely disagree. You know, Tony, South Africa has got one of the most progressive constitutions globally. And if you can leave people with institutions that work, then that is the beginning of the entrenchment of democracy. Institutions like democratic practices do not depend on individuals. They depend on institutions. So that even if Mandela is not there, and you can see that he went at a time when he was still able to give advice to those who followed him. And if you look at the South African constitution, it has overcome so many handicaps. They are on their fourth president. Yet you have never heard of any issues of fighting. You have never heard of any issues of the economic collapse. You don't hear people taking up arms in the streets of Johannesburg. And they are on their fourth change
so Mutahi,
within 20 years.
So Mutahi Kagwe, I'm asking point blank. You don't see that South Africa has a problem with this issue of land capture? That somewhere, do you believe in point blank, will that constitution survive this election coming?
Absolutely. I think so. I think so. Okay, the thing is, Tony, let's separate the issue of the constitution and the stability that they have built so far. The fact that the African National Congress is in itself looking threatened is not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing if at some point another political party becomes strong enough to also be able to take over South Africa.
So you're saying point blank you want ideology to take over.
Absolutely.
Mandela's dream can only, so how would you define the next chapter for South Africa?
I think that it is already happening. You have seen the party itself remove 2 presidents. You saw them remove Zuma the other day as a result of corruption. You saw them remove Thabo Mbeki, not because of corruption, but because Thabo Mbeki had lost touch with the people. I mean, how much better can it get? Now, obviously, they have got economic challenges because when they took over, most of the land, I think something like 87% of the land, is owned by 13% of the people. It is not sustainable. It is not tenable. So at some point, that has to change. And that is what the party is doing. And as a matter of fact, Tony, the reason why the ANC was beginning to lose the grip on the people in South Africa has to do with their inaction regarding that injustice related to land. But I think that upon the address, because Ramaphosa looks like he's addressing it and he looks like he's doing it, I think the ANC is going to be there for a while to come.
So coming nearer home,
Kenya.
Jomo Kenyatta, after him, Daniel Moi, you worked and a close friend to Mwai Kibaki, Uhuru Kenyatta. Does any of them, from the lenses of history, does any of them have ideology in their blood, or are they all creatures of their tribe?
I think that at the beginning, I think that pre-independent Kenya was fairly united. If you look at the fight for independence, and if you look at the personalities who are involved in it, rarely did anybody ever refer to a tribe. If you remember, for example, Tony, it was Jaramogi Oginga Odinga who actually said that Kenya is not going to get independence. Kenya is not going to take over power. The Africans were not going to take over power until Kenyatta was released.
And in parliament was Dagama Pinto.
Dagama Pinto was fighting for it. Yeah. So there was this feeling, this nationalism as Kenyans, that we walk together, we suffer together, but we also prosper together.
Yes.
Ochieng Oneko, Bildad Kagia. I mean, we had a whole team of people who believed in the country. And those were just the leaders that we saw. If you spoke down to the Wananchi, it was the same. You know, if Oginga Odinga went somewhere to Nyeri or to Mombasa, he was a hero because of what he was doing for the country. So I think...
Mutahi, could it be, because then we had a very progressive constitution. I had asked you earlier. We had a parliamentary system. Jomo Kenyatta was the prime minister. There was almost what people like calling Majimbo now.
Yes.
Could it be that we made a mistake to move away from that kind of system of government?
I certainly think that the presidential system was not good for Kenya. I still don't think that the presidential system is a system we should have for Kenya. And I believe it has actually played a role in dividing Kenya. Because unfortunately, Tony, it got to the point where people started believing that when somebody is the president of the country, he essentially comes from a tribe to be president of the country. And that to a large extent, they see them as the president first of the tribe and then of the country, which is very unfortunate. Because
what do you think of this phrase? It's our time to eat.
I think, Tony, it is totally misplaced and grossly off the mark. Because first and foremost, You know, if you ask the average person, if you ask the average Kalenjin when Moi was in power, and you ask them what he ate or she ate, if you ask the average Kenyan today that they are eating anything because President Kenyatta, you know, comes from the tribe, it is simply is not true. It is not. This our time has our hour needs to be defined, and hour essentially means those people who are first and foremost oriented towards stealing or towards eating, so to speak, and they come from across the board. They come from all tribes. They come from all walks of life. Those are the people whose time they say is our time. Nothing to do with tribes.
Mutahi, for those who don't know that the late John Michuki was your father-in-law, he had the Michuki rules. Yes. What are Mutahi Kagwe's rules on these matters governance?
Well, first of all, Mutahi Kagwe believes that it is time to amend this constitution so that we respond not to the immediate needs, but we address both the immediate and long-term needs. Tony, you know, at our age, we ought not to be concentrating 90% of our time on ourselves and what we can eat and what we can do today. We ought to be concentrating 50% of our time in terms of making Kenya better now, but 50% of our time ought to be concentrated on making sure that our children have a secure future and their children have even a more secure and prosperous future. To me, that begins with putting our cards on the table and saying to ourselves, we have an economic problem, which is perhaps carried by a political problem. And this political problem needs to be addressed. And whether we like it or not, we have to ask ourselves, and everybody, every leader must ask he or herself, do we want to run a tribe or do we want to run a country and a nation? And do we want this country to be exactly the way it is today, or do we want it to be different tomorrow?
And then I must ask you, the French Revolution, the American Civil War was about the North and the South on issues principle. And sometimes governments are changed by the people, or sometimes leaders give direction. Has Kenya, in your view, or is Kenya, in your view, in the hands of the leaders and clearly ethnic, chieftains, or is Kenya now waiting for something more? What must be done, Mutahi?
I think I've referred to that, Tony. First and foremost, we need to realign our thinking to become oriented to the poor. We need pro-poor philosophy, a pro-poor philosophy. Well, why do I say this, Tony? Because, you know, if you go to your village today in the rural areas, or even if you come to the city and walk to Majengo and other more or less advantaged places, you'll find that there is quite a bit of suffering going on in those places. And the point is that is what makes a nation. If you remember the words of the English philosopher, the most able must provide the least requirements for the least able. So, Tony, there should be nobody in this country sleeping without a meal. There should be nobody going hungry. And if you think pro-poor, then that should not happen, and it will not happen. But I think that we need to be realistic.
To bring you back to the Constitution.
We need to be realistic.
I need to bring you to the Constitution.
That is where I'm going, Tony.
And I'm saying, where does that, what changes to do that?
This is where I'm going, Tony. Because when you think pro-poor, and when you think that the economy must be a serious and the biggest consideration in our movement forward, then you have no choice but to say, we need to amend this Constitution. We need to amend this Constitution to create three things. The first one is stability. You need a nation that is not going to be in chaos every 5 years. Because what happens is that 2 years before every election, investors stop investing. During an election, there is fighting, expected, unknown. 2 years after, they are still waiting to see, let's see whether these people are going to settle down. We need to change that and get out of that to give the economic impetus, the room that it requires to grow. And to me, that means, if that means that we do not have a direct presidential election in Kenya, that is exactly what we should do. We should face it head on. And this generation must do so that we can save the future generation from doing so. If you look at stable countries, Tony, you go to South Africa. South Africa has a president the biggest economy in Africa, very stable, have had changes in 20 years, 4 changes, growing economically. They do not have a presidential election. What they call president there is actually the equivalent of a prime minister. If you go to Sweden, you go to Norway, you go to Britain, the country that we sort of followed after independence. If you go to India, the biggest democracy on earth is India. They don't have a presidential election because they realized a long time ago that our system, you create a political system or even a managed system that is essentially in response to the environment in which you live. And the environment in which you live, in which we live, essentially calls for a situation that is not divisive, an exercise, a political exercise that does not create divisions between this tribe and that tribe, or those people, this clan and that clan. Therefore, Tony, the first thing is to create that stability, and I believe that removal of a direct presidential election does that. The second thing that we need to have is fairness. Because, Tony, people revote when they feel that there is no social justice, and there is no justice. To create fairness, Tony, it is essential that one vote in Kenya is essentially equal to the other vote. The UK, which is the country that we copied, that most countries copied in terms of parliamentary systems, is a first-past-the-post system. In other words, count the members of parliament, and whoever has got the largest number of members of parliament becomes prime minister. They too are thinking about changing that system to proportional representation, which is a South African model. And I said South Africa has got a superior constitution. The South African model is what they call proportional representation, close proportional representation. So is Sweden. So is other stable countries. What does it mean? It means that a vote here in Nairobi is exactly equal to a vote in Nyeri, in Wajir, in Narok. And people, you feel this is fair.
Well, to hear more about proportional representation, fairness, and pro-poor ideological change in Kenya, Honorable Mutahi Kagwe will be back here point blank. This is KTN News. This is Point Blank at KTN News. Winston Churchill said sometimes when you look at democracy, sometimes it may be the worst forms of government. Honorable Mutahi Kagwe thinks that proportional representation is the way forward for Kenya. Mutahi, most Kenyans don't know what is proportional representation and why do you think so?
Okay, but let me explain that, Tony. Essentially, I have explained why I believe that we ought to move away from direct presidential elections. And history has taught us that except in 2002, almost in every other election, that is what happened. There is problems. And the economy suffers substantially, causing what I really dislike, and that is poverty and the suffering of the people. And essentially, politics is supposed to is created to make the lives of people better, not to make the lives of people worse. So coming from that perspective and departing from there, then you will understand that when Winston Churchill was talking about democracy and talking about it being the worst part of government, is because it essentially was designed to make the lives of people better. And the other governments, as in autocracy, as in dictatorship, were not succeeding in doing that because the people also need dignity. But, Tony, the British system of government is the first past the post. We call it first past the post. In other words, you have got members of parliament running in identified constituencies. And by the way, the person in England does not have to come from that constituency. You don't have to have the constituency in Juja. You can be MP, you can be assigned Mukurweini, and you'll be just fine. But
Mutahi, as we go there, we are going there, in Mukurweini, I cannot be elected, or you in Juja, because you're not corrupt. But we'll come,
let me explain. No, Tony, first of all, I want to disagree with Mukoraini. They have given me that seat. They have voted for me. So, but Tony, what I'm talking about is in England, where Churchill was talking about that particular ideal, the electoral process is one where it is constituency-based. And then what happens is that the person or the party with the largest majority of MPs in Parliament forms the government. That is why today the Conservative Party is in power and Theresa May is Prime Minister. And by the way, talking about that, you saw a change from David Cameron to Theresa May without disruption in the country.
And Mutahi, I must ask you point blank, because this is very critical. That's okay, but the problem and the root of Kenyan politics is Mutahi Kagwe if you don't have money that you have stolen. Because you're talking about
Tony,
the ideology.
You asked me to explain the difference between first past the post and proportional representation, and why I think proportional representation is the right one. That's what I'm trying to respond to. And it will answer the question you're asking. And it will even address that issue of the fact that Tony needs to bribe people to be elected in Georgia. You don't need to in a proportional representation system. Because, Tony, the way a proportional representation works is that elections are held and you vote for the party. The party has got its own list, and that requires serious legislation so as not to abuse the issue within the party. But the principle of it is that you vote for the party. If it is Jubilee, you go and vote for Jubilee, or you go and vote for NASA. Okay? Once you vote for Jubilee and you vote for NASA, we have got 290 elected members of Parliament. And simply you say, how many votes did Jubilee have, for example, in the last elections? Jubilee had, I think, 8 point something million votes. All right? What is the proportion of that within the 290 seats? And if my calculation serves me right, they would have about 170. They've got about 171. How many seats, how many votes does NASA have? Or ODM, or whatever other party? This is the number of votes the party has. What is the proportion in Parliament? And you are simply told, from Thika, this is what you voted in Jubilee. Jubilee has been given 170 seats. Your votes in Jubilee gives you 3 seats. Finished. Mambo kwisha. So, Tony, this whole thing that you have got to go, hire trucks, bribe people, be corrupt yourself and then come and criticize others for being corrupt. I mean...
So, Mutahi, the way to stop money running politics is to look at these negotiations for a referendum in a more serious way.
We have to be very serious about it. And we also have to be prepared for a paradigm shift. Now, Tony, I have had people reason and say, this sounds very complicated. What are you suggesting? Are you suggesting that the Kenyan voter is stupid and the Swedish voter is intelligent? Are you suggesting the South African, just down the south, that those voters are more intelligent than Kenyan voters? And that is a system that they use. Because, Tony, what happens in proportional representation is, look at Britain. In the Thatcher government, the Conservative Party had 42% of the votes. They had 62% of the members of Parliament. Here in Lesotho, where they are doing on first past the post, there was a very interesting situation, Tony. The opposition garnered 40% of the votes and had 1 member of Parliament out of 80 members of Parliament. That gerrymandering is what you want to avoid with a proportional representation system.
Yes, because like coming from Kiambu, I can't believe that our people, because Thika, Juja is now part of Kiambu, can decide to elect Waitito. I mean, God save his soul. But my question is, really, for working, this is serious work, Mutahi. And I need to ask, and this country needs to ask, particularly where you come from in the central region, what caliber of people are we given? And in fact, sometimes when I see the president with problems which are there because of lack of help, isn't it clear that there's something wrong with the way in which we decide who are the people we bring, the quality, the content of character, the caliber of people?
Well, 2 things, Tony. First of all, I think proportional representation, to an extent, addresses that particular issue of if a party selects people who don't work, then that is their problem. And the people eventually will vote them out. But coming back to the frustration and why we have the caliber of, quote unquote, of the people we have, I will want to quote the Honorable Mwai Kibaki, who once told, as you know, we were working in PR, And when you were working for him, I told him, look, the people that you have are not helping you. And he says, Mutahi, I can only work with the people I have been given by the people. You cannot work with people from hell, from heaven. You can only work with who you have. And in a sense, the representation in Kenya is a reflection of Kenyans. Because you can't get people from outside Kenya to be members of parliament. You get them in Kenya. The process of the electoral process in Kenya and the corruption that is within the electoral process itself is the one that provides gangsterism, where gangsterism is heroism. Gangsterism in Kenyan politics equals heroism. Now, when you get to that point, Tony, and you look at the Holy Quran and the Holy Bible and what they say about leadership, that when you have got people in leadership who should not be in leadership, then that is a start of anarchy. And you have got to be candid, point blank, and say to yourself, it is absolutely true that we have got some people within leadership who, in the eyes of reasonable individuals, ought not to be there. But it is not for you and I to choose. It is for the electorate to choose. And to a large extent, Tony, Kenyans must come to bear the responsibility and believe that people get the leadership that they deserve.
And therefore, these same people who complain of corruption, and we'll discuss that, I'm sure, in the next segment, the people who complain of governance, the people that you and I are addressing today, these Kenyan people, what can they do better to elect better leaders, even if we give them a referendum and they can change the laws? Is there educational issue? Is it not ethnic? Why do these people continue to elect people that I can't even believe are governors or members of parliament? I remember the days of Ronan Gala and Shikuku and Anyona and J.M. Kariuki, I mean, Tom Boyer.
I think that we still have people in parliament today, Tony, who are reasonable individuals and clearly admirable people who believe in this country. They are there, even in our Senate, even in our parliament. However, the balance is what has been slowly shifting from people who believe sincerely in the country and where the country can go and what they can do, to people who believe in themselves and what they can suck out of the system and feel better, or being leaders as an end in itself. Because we must remember, leadership is a means to an end. It is a means to development, not a means to enriching yourself. And that is where we as voters,
yes,
as voters, have come to that, must come to that conclusion.
So Mutahi, was there a time to buy political space? This country bribed each other, that we created too many MCAs, too many seats in parliament, in the Senate, commissions. Sometimes I feel when I look at the public wage bill, as though the 2010 Constitution, when you were minister and Kibaki was president, although it was a milestone in changing the country, sometimes I feel we created something we can't handle.
I think, Tony, you are right. You are right in this sense. The 2010 Constitution had some very good things to it. For example, the creation of the devolution was a good thing. I support devolution. I think that devolved units are doing a lot of work that the central government would never have done. It is true there are issues. It is true that there is corruption in the counties. But let's not talk about corruption in the counties as if that is where corruption only is. It is not in the central government. So, but overall, I think that the 2010 Constitution had a few good things that went for it. But I can tell you also, it had a lot of bad things going for it. When you asked me, when I was responding to your question regarding what I believe the new Constitution must address, I told you two things. One of them was stability. The other one was fairness. The third one actually is costs. The cost of governance. Tony, every Kenyan, there was a slogan, Wanjiku is tired. They are tired of bearing the cost of governance. The cost of governance is exactly what you are referring to right now. You are saying there is all these ward representatives. There are all these members of parliament. There are all these commissions that we created. The truth be told, we should not have that size of people governing us. And there is a way of eliminating all those people and still be fair. Because, for instance, when you go to the county governments, Nyeri will probably have about 30 ward representatives. And then you have got to go and appoint another, I don't know, 17 or whatever it is to balance this, to balance this, to balance the other. We can balance all those things within the 30. When we talk about gender issues in our current constitution, where you are supposed to go, get your 290 seats and 90, then add more to balance just for creation of a gender-balanced system, which I also support. But in a proportional representation system, Tony, you work within the 290. You are told, go bring your 5 people, and out of each 5 people, they must not be of the same gender, they must have youth and so on and so forth, and that balances the 290, not adding more to balance. So the cost that you are talking about is something that can be addressed in the constitutional change.
So I'm saying point blank to Mutahi Kagwe, this country is going to have a referendum, but the question that you address here is what is the question in the referendum? If you are yourself to throw a wish list, because you're talking governance here, you're saying there must be fundamental change, specifically on the executive, but beyond that, even on the units and the institutions. And what you are saying is that this is a time to get it right, and is it late or is it time?
No, I don't think it is late at all. I think that the debate that we should be having today should actually start on this one with an idea. Top of my head, if I were to be asked, Tony, and I suppose nobody is going to ask me, I would probably say that we should do our referendum early next year, but with a proviso. This is not a new constitution that we are building. This is an amendment to the constitution. And if you look at democracies all over the world, they have gone and done various amendments at certain times.
Yeah,
if you look at the US Constitution, there was a first amendment, a second amendment. Yeah. I think they are on to their 20-something, I think 27th amendment or something. I think that it would be a mistake. It would be a mistake if we were to try and get all the things that we are trying to get done at once. It would be too much change simultaneously. And it is difficult for that to be handled at the same time. I would go, for example, Tony, for addressing those 3 things. Let's address the issue of stability. So let's change this presidential system that we have got here. Let's address the issue of fairness. So let's go for a system where one vote is equal to the other vote. Let's go for the issue of cutting the cost so that Wanjiku is not suffering in this cost. Now, Tony, there are very many other things that we can do. There has been proposals that we should reduce the wards. I do not agree that right now, today, we need necessarily to reduce the wards. What we need to reduce are the people representing the wards in the manner that I explained. Why am I saying this? Because, Tony, when you want to change something, you want to operate on the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance in this particular case means, if you go and try and say we want to collapse Nyeri and Muranga and Kiambu, first of all, you have got a gazillion people fighting you, against it. So you are trying to get fundamentals done, and in the process of getting those huge things done, you lose them because you are trying to bring appendages that are not necessarily urgent. So to me, Tony, there are more ways of killing a cat. I would go for a simple, easy, piecemeal thing to sort out certain fundamentally critical issues and then move on to second amendments.
Can the country afford not to have, or can it afford to have a referendum, politically and in money-wise?
I actually think this thing, Tony, can be very simple. It doesn't have to be a humongous, expensive exercise. I don't think so. I think that things are made expensive for us for certain reasons. We don't have to go for a very expensive referendum. I think it can be done in a very simple format. And as I said, once you operate from the premise that we want it to be a cost-effective format, you will have it. You will know how to do it, and you will have it.
So Mutahi, the law provides that we need to have a census. And it becomes another issue because in the older days, boundaries and constituencies were used or gerrymandered for political benefit of certain regions. What is your say there?
First and foremost, if you are going to have a parliamentary system of government, a census is the main base. is the main base, and correctness of the census is what informs whether indeed you can have a parliamentary system of government or not. That's number one. Because, Tony, I cannot understand why anybody would want us not to have the correct census, because it's starting of the fairness system. So when you see people opposing a census or deciding that they would like to go for a system that can be easily abused, then you have to be very suspicious about why that is the case. Because, Tony, you know there are some people who will complain that we don't want to go for a technology-based system. I understand now, in fact, there is even an idea of abandoning a technology-based system.
Like biometric.
I can't see why. What we ought to be doing, there is no way a manual system is going to work better than a biometric system that is properly managed. That is the key word is properly managed. You know, Tony, computers work on the basis of something called GIGA. Garbage in, garbage out. So, but if you work in sincerity and you want to use technology to provide you with a proper electoral process, a proper census process, you will get it.
I think, Mutahi, you need to remake this point, because in the environment of the handshake, and I didn't want to discuss handshake with you in this segment, but there is political calmness. And because of that, you are saying it is to take advantage.
Absolutely.
Because there is not that I said, you said.
Absolutely.
So now we can adapt, and you would say the biometric is the way to go.
I would say biometric is the way to go, or not, you know, a technology-based system. Tony, you must be, why do you go to airports? When you go to the airport and you put your finger on that gadget in front of you, all data about you comes out. So why wouldn't you want that to be the system that you're using, so that we count you and say, this is Tony Gachoka, put your hand here. And the next time that, you put your finger anywhere, the picture of Tony Gachoka is there.
So Waziri, before anything else is discussed, and even 2022, I think you are saying that Odinga and Kenyatta have a challenge to actually sort things out.
They do.
From what I think I hear from you, you're talking about 4 issues, roughly. Talking about the referendum. You're talking about the need to have a proper census in the country in order for people to, about the boundaries and so forth. Within your issue...
It is not even, so Tony, sorry, it is not even so much about the boundaries. I'm not worried about the boundaries. The only boundary I'm worried about is the Kenya boundary. The rest of the boundaries, as in this is Nyeri, this is Murang'a, I'm not too worried about that, especially the constituency boundaries, that you easily disappear once you have got a parliamentary system based on proportional representation. What I'm more worried about is the exact figures, is getting the exact figures, never mind which boundary they are in within the country, but getting the exact figure that these are the exact number of Kenyans that we have.
And how does resource allocation then go against what you're arguing?
It is not against. It is not. It doesn't go against. Mm-hmm. No, it goes towards fairness. In other words, once you know the exact number of Kenyans that you have in this county, then when you are doing resource allocation, you ask yourself 2 questions. First and foremost, there is the issue of need, clearly. Because, you know, Tony, we are just talking about now 2019. In another 10 years, some counties will be giving the national government money instead of getting money from the county. You know, when the oil-rich counties come in, and gold-rich counties like Kwale and so on, counties that today look poor.
And blue economy.
And blue economy in Mombasa and so on, and Kisumu. So when you think about it, the counties that seem poor now, in another 20, 30 years, will be very wealthy counties. And at that time, it won't matter as much as people think today.
Mheshimiwa, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Are you telling the country that devolution should not be judged too harshly? That there will be a time it will be not a cost to the central government?
Absolutely.
Very interesting.
Absolutely.
And that if countries have time.
Yes, they do. Because, Tony, we only went 5 years into devolution. And true, you know, I served in the Senate Committee of Finance. All right? I know the mistakes that were made during the first 5 years of governance. But coming to the 10th year, we have also seen some pretty well-run counties. Makueni is one of them. Kakamega has been mentioned as a county that is growing well. Anyang' Nyong'o, I think, is causing a small evolution out in Kisumu, running a county properly. So this will grow. And you know, Tony...
Kivutha Kibwana.
That's what I said, Makueni.
Yes.
Makueni is Kivutha Kibwana. So we have seen, and let me tell you, Tony, even where there has been questions and where things have not been run too well, as in, for example, Wajir, all right, Wajir has dug more boreholes in the first 5 years of devolution than in the last 50 years of independence in Kenya. They had tarmac roads, the town was being properly organized. In 5 years, against 50 years.
And here we have
of the
Turkana,
Republic.
where people are dying of hunger.
We have Turkana where people are dying.
Mutahi.
Now, let me explain.
Annex.
Let me explain. You know, that is pure county management. And with all due respect to Nanok, who is my friend, the governor of Turkana, we must be honest. Tony, in the CDF fund, there is an emergency allocation. In CDF fund. In the county government fund, there is an emergency allocation. Therefore, the responsibility, the first call of responsibility ought to be, when I was member of parliament for Mukurweini, if I've got some people dying, who are dying in Mukurweini, I should be the first person to raise the alarm and say, people, you know, somebody here is dying, bring CDF money to buy some food to give these people. Once I can't run that and I can see it is overwhelming me, I should run to the governor. Governor, you have a CDF, you have an emergency fund. What have we done with our emergency fund at the county level? At the county level, long before you start screaming that, you know, Uhuru is not doing this or that. What is the county? That is the purpose of devolution. The purpose of devolution is to have a first-line attack, where you have got people are dying, yet Turkana, if I'm not mistaken, is probably second to Nairobi in terms of resource allocation, county fund allocation. Therefore, we ought to have seen, before the media were raising all these issues, we ought to have seen some serious activity, serious action with the Turkana Emergency Fund. And then we would be saying, the governor of Turkana has called an emergency meeting, you know, to involve the national government because they have been overwhelmed by what is happening in Turkana, and therefore we want Uhuru and his team to move in and help us. That is devolution. Devolution is not just a question of getting money and employing people in the counties.
This is KTN News. It's point blank. The late J.M. Kariuki said, we can't live in a country of 10 million beggars at 10 millionaires. Mutahi Kagwe is saying the cost of government, lack of fairness, and he says Nanok and Turkana County have failed this country. Here on Point Blank, taking a break. You're watching KTN News, and this is Point Blank. Mutahi Kagwe, last week we had John Githongo here with us at Point Blank. He said never in the history of this country has so much corruption plundered this nation. Do you concur?
Perhaps I can even rephrase it. In other words, never has so much money been stolen by so few people in the history of this nation. Probably. That is even an additional.
Mutahi,
so now Tony, I think that if anybody who is honest will tell you that this is a serious cancer in our society. And I actually don't envy the president at all as he tries to fight, you know, this fight against corruption, because the war against corruption is strong, but never underestimate how corruption fights back. And you can see it. You can see it fights back to the extent that it justifies itself that, yes, we have stolen so much money, you know, towards building the Serena, but build the Serena anyway. What sort of God-forsaken language is that?
We go to church. So we receive the money on Sunday.
You know, Tony, understand one thing. The fight against corruption is not an individual-based fight. And that's what you are establishing just now. You just talked about the churches and how the churches are a big recipient, of the proceeds of corruption. In fact, Tony, a while back, a friend of mine, one of Maina Commander, was telling the church people, at least when you say a prayer for this money, can you say, Lord God, if this money is stolen, please deny whoever brought it here any more money. And Lord God, if this is genuine money, please add the person who brought more money. At least create some decency, in a prayer, instead of saying that, thank you, Lord, for this stolen money.
On a bigger issue, and on that issue, and I don't want you to lose the thought, there's not even shame, is what you're saying.
There is no shame, because, I'll tell you why there is no shame. Because, Tony, today, if you defined corruption properly, and you said, if you have ever received money from, in a campaign, you have ever received money from a candidate, or if you say, if you are a candidate, if you are a member of parliament, you have run for parliament, I have run for parliament. If you say, if you have ever run for parliament and you have given people money, if you are a policeman and you have ever received money, if you are a driver and you have ever bribed a policeman, that's all corruption. If you said, all those people who have ever done something like that, please come to a certain police station, that police station would have to be Nyayo Stadium. Because that is the number of people who would actually present themselves honestly at the Nyayo Stadium. So I'm not justifying anything in terms of corruption. What I'm trying to say is this. This is a cancer. This is a bad, serious cancer that can finish our country. And the only way to deal with cancer, as you said earlier, is first and foremost, it cannot be started at the bottom. It must be started at the top. If cancer is not being addressed at the top, going to the guy who is bribing a policeman is a waste of time. Because the guy will believe, if my minister or if my leader, if the police boss is taking bribes himself, who is he to tell me to stop?
There are some people who tell me that when they watch Point Blank, they think that I'm attacking the deputy president. But I want to ask you, because Uhuru is your friend, and I know more than many Kenyans, that Uhuru is a very close friend of yours. How is he going to continue acting as though he's a hostage and people believing that he's been blackmailed? Because if everyone is talking about this thing and everybody knows what is going on, Mutahi, what would you say?
I think the first thing starts with determination. It starts with determination to fight the corruption. And I think that I do not agree with those who believe that he cannot fight corruption because of hostage, because he has already started fighting corruption. Had it not started, had nothing been going on, I think people would be justified to say we're not fighting corruption. The reason why the debate for corruption, Tony, is high as it is today is because post-handshake, the focus has been on getting rid of this cancer. And at least the beginning, the fight against this cancer. And it is quite true that political reality prior to the handshake was such that it was very difficult.
Yeah, but
the maneuver, let me just...
I have to take you point blank. Yeah. You are in charge of Kibaki's PR.
Yes,
And I know what happened when agro-leasing and these things started.
Yes.
And the position you took then.
Yes.
And the position Kibaki did then.
Yes.
Why is Uhuru, your friend, now not acting?
I don't think it is true that he is not acting. Let me explain, Tony. During the Kibaki regime, if you remember, when you are mentioned in those things, agro-leasing, for example, two things happened. First and foremost, you step aside. Now, Tony, there is this notion that you have got to cling there, irrespective of how long you are accused. Stepping aside as a concept does not necessarily mean that you are absolutely guilty of the offense. It simply means that you step aside to allow for fair investigations to take place. And if you are not guilty, even Kemunya said that I'd rather die. And he stepped aside, but he came back because it was proven that he was not guilty. This is the point. And Tony, the first person who should you should not be forced. As an honorable member, as a cabinet member, you should not actually be forced by the president to step aside. You should know that you're exposing the president to ridicule. Your first priority when you are in the cabinet, irrespective of any other position except that of the president, is to protect the president. And the president's protection means that the reputation of his presidency comes first in your mind. Therefore, Tony, if you are serving in the Uhuru administration and you are accused to the extent that you can see the public has no confidence in you, it should not even be Uhuru asking you to leave.
So, Mutahi,
you should be stepping aside.
Mutahi
You should be
Kagwe,
announcing.
You have served as a cabinet secretary.
I have.
And what are you saying?
I am simply saying, Tony,
I
am simply saying to my colleagues, when you get accused to the extent that you are damaging the reputation or stand of the president, that is when you say, I am not guilty of this offense. However, to give peace and to give the president the leeway to in fact receive correct information on this matter, I am going to step aside. And once you step aside, if you are proven not guilty, as happened in the past, you resume your position. That, Tony, is fair and square.
So, Mutahi, I asked you this for my own personal, vindication. People have been talking about corruption under Uhuru. John Githongo told us last week that he has never seen anything like this, that it has gone a runaway. Now we've got groups within Jubilee aligned to the deputy president, attacking the president. You got the people of the president's side, like Mutahi Kagwe, quiet. No, I have to ask point blank.
Yes, and let me answer you point blank. It is because the people, as you say, who support the President of the Republic of Kenya, and that it should be most Kenyans because of what he's trying to do. I think, Tony, you have to understand, I told you earlier, corruption fights back. And it fights back viciously. Particularly those very close to corruption who realize, this is my last stand. And without this, I have nothing. Therefore, they have nothing to lose. They have nothing to lose. They are there courtesy of. There are people who are there, Tony, courtesy of that leadership. Therefore, why else would do anything different? If your election was rigged, if I rigged you in, Tony, into parliament to be a member of parliament, and you know damn well I am the one who rigged you in. Yes. Why wouldn't you support me? So
Mutahi, is Maina Commander, who is a good friend of yours and mine, and Mutahi Kagwe, Barire, and all of you, so many eloquent people on the other side of this divide, is it going to be business as usual?
It cannot be, and it has
as
not
people
been.
Wake up every day, and actually they even abuse, they attack the head of state.
I think that there has been a response in every issue where it has demanded. But let me tell you something else also, Tony. We are not defending. There is nothing to defend about Uhuru Kenyatta. Because Uhuru Kenyatta, there is nothing Uhuru Kenyatta that is doing that demands defense. What Uhuru Kenyatta is doing just demands support. That's very different from when you do something that demands defense. Who is guilty? Uhuru has got no guilt to be defended about. You can only defend people like that when you think the people are guilty and need that defense. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, there is not just the leadership, the masses of Kenya, the people, Wanjiku and Atieno, or in the streets of Nairobi and elsewhere in this country, support the president in the fight against corruption. And they have expressed it and they have said it.
So I want to ask you, is there a danger that we now need to see Mutahi Kagwe at our Furaha Stadium? In Mukureni, we want to see Mutahi Kagwe in Tononoka, joining with other people who say that now it is time to talk to the people, because the people seem as though the country, if you read the press, it's as though the country is collapsed. There's a sense of hopelessness. And I'm asking, and I know Kenyans respect you, right across the great county of Nyeri and everywhere in this country. Mutahi, what can be done more to help Uhuru Kenyatta be credible and seen to be fighting this monster of corruption that's not been done now?
Okay. The first thing is there's a technical issue and a political issue. The technical issue, Tony, is that we need to support and fund the institutions that work against corruption and strengthen them entirely. That is the Kinoti groups, the Hanji groups, the entire structure that fights corruption ought to be completely supported in two ways. Number one is that the institution itself should be properly funded, the institutions themselves. Number two is that those people involved in those institutions ought to be properly remunerated. Because, Tony, if you tell a guy You pay him 10,000 shillings a month, and you're telling him to follow Tony, who has stolen 1 billion. You can almost put your bottom shilling to the fact that he is going to take a bribe. Therefore, that structure, the structural dimension of it, the technical and structural dimension of it ought to be done that way. The second thing is this, is that politically, Tony, the leadership, and when I say leadership, I am not talking about only those people who are elected in parliament. Indeed, Tony, if you remember, when we issued a statement as ex-members of parliament in support of Uhuru Kenyatta to say that we must support this fight against corruption, I remember there are those who are saying, who are those people representing? Who does Tony represent to be talking about the fight against corruption? And I asked them, who did Kimathi represent? Which constituency was he elected in when he was fighting for the freedom of Kenya? And Gandhi was from which county?
Or Martin Luther King.
Or Martin Luther King. Which position did Martin, or Muge, here in Eldoret, Bishop Muge? Which did he belong to the Senate, or did he belong to the National Assembly, or which ward did he represent? So the leadership in its entirety, must bite the bullet and say to themselves, this is not about us. This is about Kenya, and this is about the future.
I want to ask you this, and it's point blank. Beyond the good words, and beyond the statement I read and I saw you with several MPs, Minor Commander and others, beyond that, don't you think the time has come? Martin Luther King went to the people. Mahatma Gandhi, in your own words, when people wouldn't listen, the British, he went to the people. Mandela.
Let me ask you, Tony.
Is the time coming
Tony,
for corruption to be not just discussed?
Already there. It's already there, Tony. It's already there. It's already happening. Why am I saying it is already happening? What happens to President Uhuru Kenyatta when he goes on the mics, when he is going into Kakamega and Kisii and so on? What does he talk about? What does he tell the people? What does he tell the masses? Corruption must be fought, and corruption has nothing to do with tribes. In other words, in terms of the leadership, the president has already taken the fight to the people, and I'll tell you why. If he doesn't take the fight to the people, and the people do not understand the fight, the war that is on against corruption, that is when the people themselves will take the branches and go on a riot and say the president is doing nothing. Now, that is not
I have to ask you this question.
Let me just say something, Tony. Let me just say something, Tony, before you go on. The most shocking thing for me is this, is that people have become so subservient, so subdued in their reaction to things, that when you are told that a dam is being built in your village, to take care of you, your families, your cattle, your farming, your future, and that the person who is being accused of having taken money for that dam comes from that village, you go and defend the person instead of worrying about your dam. So you must ask yourself, which Kenyans are you talking about who are coming to the streets?
So me, I'm asking you this question, point blank. Kenya is bigger than Central Province. We have been given, this country has had so many presidents. You have Jomo Kenyatta, Moi Kibaki, now Uhuru Kenyatta. Are you going to say that the legacy that Kenyatta will leave to all the other communities of Kenya who deserve to be president, any of the men and women, whether it is Godana, the late Godana was presidential material, or anybody you can name, is this going to be the way we live Kenya, under the watch? And you, coming from the region, and as a friend of the president, and the country is crying, 42 tribes, 47 counties crying every day about corruption, including Rift Valley, where maize, dams, and all those things. What do you say, Mutahi?
I say this, Tony. First and foremost, the war against corruption is not individualized. It cannot be just Uhuru Kenyatta. Uhuru Kenyatta, to me, is doing his bit. The question, Tony, is what you and I know what you're doing because this is part of the process. You know what I'm doing because you're seeing me.
But he's watching me and you. Come on now, go past.
So the question is, the question, Tony, is this: what is the general leadership doing? And more importantly, when you're the Mwananchi, when you're the Mwananchi, tell the member of parliament from the area, unless you support the fight against corruption, we are going to demonstrate against you in our own streets. It shows you don't believe in us, you don't believe in our nation, and you believe in stealing our own money. When is the Mwananchi going to say that this is not going to happen? We are not going to accept that our dam is taken and we come and support you. That's not going to happen. When that happens, Tony, that is when the Mwananchi has taken that power. But the point is, then that's what we started with in the first place, that corruption has permeated the system so much that even those who would be coming out to demonstrate are themselves culpable in corruption.
So now, let's go, because of time. Raila Odinga is somebody I know you have consulted, because I thought I saw you at Capitol Hill. I don't know what you think about the handshake, but my question is, if that handshake cannot deal with corruption, you've talked to me about governance, and the time is short. What are the things the handshake, to your mind, may fail or succeed upon?
Let me tell you something.
On what sword will they follow?
Let me tell you something, Tony. I am honest, point blank, I can tell you this. Without that handshake, you would not, I don't believe that you'd be seeing the fight you are seeing today against corruption. And the centralization of issues corruption would probably not be as high as they are today. Let's be every Kenyan knows that. Let's be honest about it. Because political survival calls for compromises. And the higher the political survival is required, the more compromises that you need. I think that what the Honorable Raila Odinga has done is put in some fire. You know, he has gone to Uhuru and he has said to Uhuru, listen, I know you want to fight against corruption, but the way you are right now on your own without my support, you will not be able to do it. You will be frustrated to the core. I am here and I am going to support you. Let's work together. So anybody denigrating or not looking at the value, you know, the value of the handshake is wrong. Now, having said that, we have got to make further use of it. The handshake cannot bring temporary stability. The handshake has got, or temporary fight against corruption. The handshake has gone to go further and say, we want to entrench this stability in institutional terms, and we want the fight against corruption to be fought so severely during our time that nobody is going to dare to repeat it again. But Tony, you know, by the end of the day, this is a political strategy. Let's never remove these things from politics. Handshakes have come and handshakes have gone. And therefore it is imperative on us as leadership to make sure that this handshake survives. Those fighting corruption will also be fighting the handshake. They will do everything that they can to destabilize that atmosphere that we can get things done. For me, the message I would like to send directly to both His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga is move fast. Move fast. Because if you delay, those who intend to divide and destroy the handshake will move faster.
And I thought you said earlier that the referendum they must announce immediately.
I am for it totally, 100%.
Because it is the referendum that you are saying will give them the foundation or the superhighway, in Kibaki's words,
yeah,
of God. So you are saying to move is to put it to the people.
You have to put it to the people, and this is the point that they can get it done.
Yes, we've got these problems.
They can, and they can get them done. I tell you, Tony, today, between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, they can move things. They can get stuff done. If they can't get it done with the people that they have, let them get people who can do it. But let's at least see serious movement in the institutionalization of what they are trying to do. On their own, as individuals, they can only succeed in short-term gains. But if they institutionalize what they are doing, and that to me is going through the referendum, changing the systems that we have, if they institutionalize those things, then we can say that history will record that part of the legacy of President Kenyatta and Right Honorable Odinga was that they created long-term peace and long-term stability in Kenya.
This man, Mutahi Kagwe, I mean, Minister, I know you are Minister for Information and Communication. A lot of Kenyans may not know that they will not have had M-Pesa or even fiber optic today, which runs the internet. Tuambie kidogo siku hizo.
I remember those days with a lot of nostalgia, Tony, because from 2000, when I took over in 2006, Kenya was not connected to the rest of the world, only through satellite. And Dr. Bitange Demo, who was then my permanent secretary, and a good one at that, we worked together very closely to make sure that Kenya was connected. And we had to make very quick moves, because it is not just a question of laying a fiber cable or, for that matter, launching M-Pesa. It took many things before then. For example, releasing the interconnectivity from telecom alone. Prior to my time, there was only communication through telecom. So the international gateway licenses we gave to Safaricom, we gave to Airtel, and the others, so that they were able to make fast communication.
Where have those days gone? Leo watu wanakula mahindi. They're even eating dams. Wewe ulikuwa na M-Pesa, si ungekuchukua kama 20%.
Sikuchukua hata 0.0001%. Because my friend, my late father, God rest his soul, Kagwe Mutahi, and my mother, Nyawera, did not teach me to take people's things. So I'm afraid that my upbringing would not allow me, to get part of M-Pesa. And I think Bob Colimo can tell you that I have no shares in that thing.
Yeah, but will we have a cabinet like this again? Is there going to be a time a cabinet minister can work for the country without going to Italy? People are collecting money in Italy.
Tony, I agree that there are always bad apples in an institution. And even in ours, they were there. But what I can tell you is that I also know that there are cabinet ministers to this day who are trying very hard to work in a very big way for for this country. You have got the Matiangis who are really trying. You have got the Monica Jumas who are working hard to create a very positive image for Kenya. So it is not true to say that there are no cabinet ministers who are working. They are there and they are working.
Mutahi, the last time I've seen you, you have been master of ceremony in various very important funerals. And I hope it would not be mine next.
I'm quite happy to give that service to you, Tony.
My question is, where is Mutahi Kagwe going? What's Mutahi Kagwe doing? Certainly, from my point of view, Kenya needs you.
Well, Tony,
gloves now.
Tony, that question has been asked, not just by yourself, but quite a number of people. But for me, I take a day at a time. As I told you earlier, I do not believe that leadership or providing or helping people or changing things necessarily is assigned to those who have got political office. So I have not divorced myself from leadership. But I do respect the people's position and the people's choices, and to say that these are the people who are elected to speak in these issues. And I believe that that is what we should all do, and respect the people's position and give them that space. That is not to say I am away. I am busy, Tony. Yeah. I am a farmer. I'm a businessman. You come to Nyeri. I'll give you goat milk.
Before tufunge hii program, salimia watu wa Nyeri wa Mukureni. Unataka kusema nini?
First of all, I want to say, I want to thank the people of Nyeri. I want to thank the people more specifically the people of Mukureni, for having given me opportunities to serve them. It's a privilege. It is not a right. Those seats belong to those people, and they only give it to you if they wish. And if they don't want to, they keep it. That is not to say you should not be forever grateful and you should not be bitter. For me, what I would like to say is this. Kenyans, not just the Nyeri people, Kenyans as a whole, let us take responsibility. Leadership is expensive in the long term. And therefore, what I would wish to see is a new Kenya, a new constitution come into place, future stability and fairness and social justice for our nation.
You're watching KTN News, and this is Point Blank. Mutahi Kagwe says this handshake has to become a bigger issue. The handshake is institutionalized, because he says otherwise it will be an opportunity lost. And he said that Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, his message is let's do it quickly. Let's be fast about it. This is KTN News.
Point Blank by TG was filmed on location at the Nairobi Serena Hotel.